Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. For the last 2 days, my colleague has raised issues related to regulation of industry in this province. It's an issue that has been raising flags for a long time. In 2016, in her report on compliance and enforcement in BC's mining industry, the Auditor General warned about regulatory capture as a risk in British Columbia, which is what occurs when the regulator, created to act in the public interest, instead serves the interests of industry. At Mount Polley, BC had the largest mining disaster in Canadian history. We currently are home to the largest pollution of a watershed in North America in the Elk Valley. In my own community, a landowner quarried his property for 10 years without a mining permit. It took a community years to get the Ministry of Mines to step in and regulate this mining activity. And now, on the same day that the former Premier stepped down as MLA, he announced that he had taken a board position with one of the largest mining companies in the world. This has raised serious and important questions about the relationship between elected officials and industry in this province. Through you, Honourable Speaker, to the Minister of Environment. Did the former Premier have conversations with him regarding whether to lobby the federal government not to bring the Elk Valley pollution issue to the International Joint Commission?
Minister of Environment, Climate Change Strategies.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. The member makes, I think, a very serious allegation because the member knows and was supportive of the Lobbyists Act that was introduced by our government very early upon taking office, that any elected official that held a post in the Executive Council, any deputy minister is prohibited from lobbying members of the government for a period of 2 years. I would expect that the member has enough respect for the former Premier to understand that he, having been leader of a government that brought in such an important piece of legislation, would not violate it. The direct answer to your question is no.
Leader of third party supplemental.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I wasn't making allegations, I'm asking questions. In December of 2021, the federal government indicated that it was considering referring Teck's selenium pollution in the Elk Valley to the International Joint Commission, the IJC, because this pollution is such a long-standing issue. This company has had the largest environmental fine in Canadian history. In March of 2022, Teck wrote to the Federal Minister of Foreign Affairs requesting that pollution in the Elk Valley not be referred to the IJC. And because of that lobbying legislation that was brought in under the minority government, we know the lobbying that happened in this building. Over the following days, Teck lobbied this government several times. On April 12th, Teck lobbied the former Premier's Chief of Staff, the Deputy Ministers of the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Energy and Mines. The subject of their discussion was, quote, provincial U.S. transboundary matters. 2 days later, according to FOI documents, the Minister of Environment and the former Minister of Energy and Mines wrote to the Federal Minister of Foreign Affairs, requesting that pollution from Teck's operations in the Elk Valley not be referred to the International Joint Commission. Teck's last meeting with the former Premier was on October 11th, 2022. On November 18th, the former Premier stepped down, and by December, he was discussing with Teck a board appointment with their spin-off company, Elk Valley Resources. A powerful corporation lobbied this government 47 times since January 2022. The government then lobbied on behalf of Teck to the federal government to not refer the issue of Teck's pollution of the Elk Valley to the International Joint Commission. My question for you, Honourable Speaker, is to the former Minister of Energy and Mines and the current Minister of Forests. Did the former Premier have conversations with him regarding whether to lobby the federal government not to bring Elk Valley pollution issue to the International Joint Commission?
Minister of Environment and Climate Change Strategy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I've answered the question, I thought, quite clearly to the member. Members of government regularly meet with lobbyists from corporations, with lobbyists from environmental organizations, and surprisingly, they don't always agree. But not surprisingly, members of government, whether they are members of cabinet or deputy ministers or ADMs or executive directors, consider a whole range of important options, fact, and policy considerations in making decisions. In the case of Teck and the water quality issues as a result of selenium, there has been ongoing discussion with the nations on either side of the border, with the corporation, with citizens in the area, with governments south of the border, as well as with academics south of the border about science-based water quality guidelines. Those conversations continue. We have recently set up an extremely transparent website to inform anyone who is interested on either side of the border of the progression of efforts to effectively treat water quality, for which by the near future, Teck will have spent $2 billion to address. It is true that their initial efforts were not adequate, and that's why there were escalating financial penalties from both the federal government and the provincial government that were huge. Those penalties send a message. Our actions to address water quality send a message. We will continue working with people on both sides of the border, as well as with Teck and now Elk Valley, to address water quality issues, to ensure that the rights of the Ktunaxa nations are protected and the water quality in the area comes up to a standard that everybody expects.